one that can see.
Where there's thunder, there's lightning. I am John Nada, and these are the Days of Thunder. I used to work with a guy that was a single dad, and he was telling me this interesting concept that he had for a tattoo one time while we were going about our daily work. He wanted to get a poison dart frog or a poison arrow frog tattooed on him. And I thought, that's kind of weird, I didn't know if maybe he was like into shrooms or LSD or something, and that was the reasoning behind it. Well, he explained it to me, and when he did, it made a lot of sense, and it also kind of ended up being a really good symbol or picture of the modern dating relationship scene. See, this guy was a little bit of a Lothario. Wasn't a bad-looking dude. Had a pretty energetic and magnetic personality. But he, like many other men, that didn't save him from heartbreak and the perils of dating modern women. Like I said in the beginning, he was a single father. And we oftentimes talked about that experience, or his experience as a single father, and how he had went to like a help group for single mothers, but I mean, he had went in the hopes or in the thinking that maybe he could get some help as well. And they more or less didn't welcome him in, more or less were like, this is for women only, kick bricks, tough luck, but, we're not interested in helping single fathers. And as you can imagine, this dude had a lot of anger and rage about the whole situation. But, he worked, he did what he had to do to provide for his child, because the mother of the child, I think, was involved in drugs and was pretty much useless in her own right, and was no good in terms of being around the kid as any kind of example. So, he dealt with being a single parent, in the interest of having good role models and things, and not having these bad influences around his child. I say all that to say this: the point of the tattoo, the poison arrow frog or the poison dart frog, if anybody's familiar with this animal knows that it's highly poisonous. The Amazonian people would take arrowheads and different weapons of war, and rub them onto the poison arrow frog, and then use them in combat as a deadly toxin, or sort of I guess an early biological warfare. But as you can see by the pictures, they're very beautiful animals, very majestic animals. I mean, very colorful, very attractive to the eye. And so it is with women. Very beautiful, very alluring in form, and yet very dangerous if mishandled, much in the same way that the poison arrow frog or poison dart frog is dangerous if mishandled, and in fact, oftentimes deadly if mishandled. And this goes for women as well. Look at all the pitfalls, look at all the perils one has to deal with in today's modern dating world. False rape accusations, divorce rate, the threat of losing half or more of what you've worked your life to accomplish and accumulate, being a parent to your own child, having any custody or rights to your own child. And there's no shortage of, look at the numbers. I know it's not politically correct to say, and people live in this fairy tale land where men are never the victims of domestic violence, but oftentimes the numbers are higher for men. Not to mention the fatal attraction effect. I mean, my own, I've known several friends and others who have actually had altercations with their wives or girlfriends or whoever that were started by the woman. And they were in just as much danger from that woman, in the physical sense, as would have been any woman from a man. I mean, let's make no mistake. Look at wars over the years. Women and children are perfectly capable of killing a grown man. if they are so inclined to do so. And not only that, but it can be a detriment to your career as well. I mean, all it takes is one false accusation of assault from her, whether it happened or not. I mean, in a lot of cases, all the woman need do is accuse the man of assault, or the definition of assault is very loose anyway, and he ends up in jail. Or the woman wants nothing to do with the guy, takes the kids, leaves him. He's stuck with child support. He's unable to pay the child support, and he ends up in prison. You know, when a mother's unable to provide for her children, she gets government benefits. When a man is unable to provide for his children, he gets a prison sentence. But, you know, the poison arrow frog, I think, is very descriptive of women in one sense, but I think there's another animal that's also equally descriptive, and that is that of the chameleon. You know, this is something that I experienced quite a bit when, you know, I was still, you know, I guess pretty active in the dating scene, that you would meet a girl and you would be surprised, like, wow, this girl's into so many things that I'm into. She's so like me. We have so many similar interests and similarities. Only to come to find out that it was all an act. It was all a chameleon changing of colors. She drew you in long enough to get you to get it, you know, be interested in her and have these feelings. And then little by little, and oftentimes many men realize this and experience this after marriage, that the person they thought they married is, you know, no longer exists and is somebody else now. Well, the reality of it is that they were never that person. They were that person long enough to snag the resources and status and all that. And then once they had that, and they had the safety net of Big Daddy government and the consequences of divorce for men hanging over their husband, there was no longer any need to put the act up. You see, there's a hive mind amongst women. There's only one woman, as I've often said on this program. Only one woman, but many faces. And so people entertain this idea, men entertain this idea that they just haven't met the right one, or they get told they haven't met the right one. But the hive mind is very real. It's not that they haven't met the right one, it's that there really is only one woman, just different faces. And that women are of a hive mind. They're all more or less the same. We've heard it, AWOL, NAWOL, but more or less the general behavior of women is the same. And many people blame this on feminism. Many people blame this on, you know, modern, evolving and adapting Western culture. But it's always been there. It's just that feminism has now removed all this social stigma, and all the cultural institutions that used to frown upon this have kind of gone by the wayside. And so we're just seeing it now in its unfettered form. And that brings me to another thing. It seems that a lot of time gets spent on women's feelings about things and women's perspective on things. And again, this shouldn't be, you know, come as a shock to anybody. We live in a gynocentric society, but we hear the stories of, you know, that this girl just can't seem to find the right guy, or every guy she ends up with ends up, you know, not wanting to commit to her. You know, there's countless Hallmark movies based on this theme, countless rom-coms, if you will, based on this theme. But no one cares about male alienation. You know, a woman gets rejected, it stopped the presses, slam the brakes on the locomotive. A woman got rejected because, by and large, you know, women do everything and anything possible within their power and realm of existence to avoid rejection. But as guys, we're expected to gird our loins up. I mean, rejection for a guy is par for the course. It's a pretty strong reality for, you know, 99.9% of the male population. At some point in time, we've been rejected. I mean, for us to have any kind of like female interaction at all, we have to make the first move. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. And so in that, we have all experienced rejection, and it's to the point where it's like, I mean, I don't even really bat an eye at it, you know. But if it happens to a woman, it's like the eschaton has taken place, you know. And, you know, it's just a very interesting thing, because male alienation is just something that nobody seems to be concerned with. And yet the idea that a female is alienated or alone or feels lonely is this huge deal, when, you know, for the average female, you know, she has loads of attention. She has loads of people just wanting the chance to talk with her. And this brings me to another thing that I've thought about, and wonder if anyone else has noticed. But, you know, with the so-called transgendered, and you know, I could say a lot about that, but let's just kind of leave it at that. One of my old jobs, I actually worked with two transgendered people, so-called. And it seems like in the past that, you know, obviously there was more stigma to all that. And here lately, with the push by the media and others, it's become more and more acceptable. It's become more and more mainstream. Now, that's not really my point. The point is that I've noticed as time has gone on, you know, it seemed like a lot of so-called transgendered people were just looking for someone to accept them as is. But now, whether it be a result of culture or a result of the actual physical hormonal effects that take place within that person's body and mind, or a combination of the both, it seems as if a lot of so-called transgendered women are as hypergamous as, you know, actual women are. And the interesting flip side to that is that a lot of so-called transgendered men are realizing that it wasn't quite the privileged party that they thought it was when it comes to being a male. They're realizing that they've lost a lot of that attention that they had before that. They're realizing that it's harder for them to have relationships, and that they don't get a lot of the special treatment that they got when they were more recognizably female. And that a lot of these so-called transgendered women are just as hypergamous in the sense that they have lists and requirements that are every bit as insurmountable as that of a you know, actual woman. And again, a lot of that's probably the biological and physical properties that are taking place, but I think also the push in culture making that more acceptable. But I just thought that was an interesting phenomenon, that, again, we see that I don't think that it's all cultural. I do think there's a level and a dynamic there that's biological. It's just that the culture, you know, allows it to be more on display, so to speak. I mean, I can remember growing up, and I'm not that old, but I could remember the amount of people that I knew that came from divorced homes was very few. It was sort of a taboo, really, at that time. And I can remember the attitude, again, when I was growing up, and I'm sure, I mean, I'm certain that it was the same way before this, that there was almost a scarlet letter associated with being a divorcee or having been divorced. And so it was something that society and the cultural institutions regulated. And it wasn't a prevalent thing like it is now. I mean, I don't know what the latest statistics are, but let's say that 50% of marriages end in divorce, and that the majority of the divorce proceedings are, of course, initiated by women. You know, this is something that has been growing and metastasizing over time. And now, you know, out of the people I meet, it's very rare that I meet anybody whose parents are still together or stayed together for any period of time. You know, it seems like the divorce, when it does take place, takes place in the formative years with the person, when they're very young, oftentimes prepubescent or whatever. And so that really has had an effect on culture. It really has. I mean, you can see the minefield that it's left in its wake. So, it's no wonder it's no wonder the marriage rates are going down and slowing and halting, to the point now that you've got women that they're so hard up to get married that they're marrying themselves, which speaks to the narcissism, which speaks to the hypergamy that, even that nobody but themselves is going to be able to fulfill these black hole sized needs that they have. And so there we are. And no wonder MGTOW continues to grow and continues to become, a force that eventually has to be dealt with. Before they ignored us, then they, pointed and laughed at us. And now there's a real sense that there is a fear of us, because there is no signs or shortage of this slowing down. Well, this has been the Days of Thunder. I am John Nada, and remember, you're free to do as you're told.